Welcome to Emuna and Geula through the Parsha. This week's Parsha, Parshat Beshalach. We're going to talk about a couple of different things, jumping into the sea of Emuna, the idea of fear and how to be released from it. Also, what is the way to enter into the Promised Land, as we're going to see in this week's Parsha? What does the crossing of the sea teach us? What does it require of us in order to enter into that sea of Emuna? It requires a lot of Mesirut Nefesh, a lot of self-sacrifice and giving of myself, the surrendering of myself and my will. And also, how important is it for me to give of myself? What does this actually bring to me? What fulfillment does it give me? And last but not least, we're going to talk about song and how song is born and what does it mean to sing? Where does it come from? What does it express inside of myself? So, Be'ezrat Hashem, all of these things I hope that we'll be able to learn together in this week's Parsha. So let's start talking a little bit about fear. What is the whole idea of fear? Where does it come from? So Chazal teach us that fear comes from the averas that one commits. The minute that any one of us, God forbid, falls into a place of transgression, in essence, we give over our vitality to the, so to speak, the other side. All of the kedusha, all of the ability to receive bounty, all of that gets captured, it gets imprisoned, speak, by the other side. And the only way that we're able to get back and receive back that vitality is to have it get returned to us, which is the process of tshuva. And that is essentially the only way to get back that which we lost initially because of the fact that we fell prey to the Yetzer Hara and the evil inclination and all of its tactics. So tshuva brings back that which we once had. It brings back the holiness that we once had. But now when a person does tshuva, the tumah, the other side, can no longer stand the light that gets reinstated and returned to the person who does tshuva, and so it automatically leaves itself from us, so to speak, removes itself from our midst, and in turn gives us back the vitality that it once stole, sort of like a thief that takes something that doesn't belong to him, and then once someone shines the flashlight on him, and he sees he's been caught, and he's been caught red-handed, he, so to speak, leaves, and hopefully leaves behind also that which he stole. So that's somewhat an analogy so that we understand. So when a person is in a position where they suddenly find themselves in fear, it is because they feel that they're susceptible to the harmful forces, because they feel that they're no longer being protected by the holiness that Hashem grants us by virtue of us doing His will. And so fear, the core root of fear, it comes from the fear of being susceptible to harm from those outside forces. And so the minute we return that beautiful light, that light of holiness, by us doing tshuva from ahava, then all of those mitzvahs that were once taken away from us, they now return to us in the spirit of a very strong light. And like we said, in that light, the evil inclination, the Yetzer Hara, the paro, can no longer withstand being in our midst when we are embraced and enveloped in this amazing light. And so essentially what we learn in this week's Parsha, just to put that idea together, is that this week when we left Mitzrayim, it says that we left berechush gadol, we left with a lot of possessions. Chazal asks, what are these possessions? What does it mean that we left with a lot of vessels, of worthy, wealthy vessels? So the Chazal can continue to explain that what we left is we left with the richness, the wealthy possessions that enabled us to conquer our own geula, which is the wealth of the soul. The soul needs these kelim, these vessels, to be able to be strong enough to go stride forth and tread forth in life towards the path of Geula. And so essentially that is what Am Yisrael left Mitzrayim with. They left with elements of treasure that all of these enabled them to acquire the proper and adequate possessions to be able to carve their path towards Geula. Where does Paro sit? Paro sits, so to speak, as we spoke about in past weeks. He sits on our neck. Tzavar, the Tzavar, Paro, is from Oref, and that's essentially where the Tzavar is. It's where the back of the neck is. And if you look at it in the U.S., someone who's considered a very diligent worker who has a very good career, and he's involved very much in his job, he's called a white collar, sort of from the white collar group of workers, as opposed to blue collar, which is a little bit more less academic and more hands-on and with less academic background. And so we see even here in the description of how we go out to work that in essence, it's considered something to do with the collar that sits on the back of, that sits in the neck. That is Paro. Paro sits there. He wants to enslave us to the Chomer, enslave us inside the materialism, and that is his symbol. His symbol is to get a person to not live, to just go out and to work and to become enslaved by the Chomer, by the physicality of this world, to eat and be merry, for tomorrow, chas v'shalom, a person may die. That's the motto of Paro, and that is essentially Paro's symbolic figure, is to go and work and to be enslaved to this world. The derech, the way that we make our way into the promised land, it's generally it involves, obviously we know, being a Jew, living a life of Torah and mitzvahs. It involves a life of a lot of Mesirut Nefesh, of self-sacrifice, of giving up maybe my immediate desire for a long-term goal. It involves a battle. In other words, even if we see a shortcut in the road, it actually may be a long cut. So what we need to understand is when you want to get towards your goal, you have to know that even sometimes the shortest way may appear to be very easygoing, but there is still a lot of work involved to get to make sure that you actually end up going to where you need to, where you have put your mind to want to actually go. And essentially, that is part of the journey that we travel when we go into the Promised Land. We want to go into the Promised Land. We want to go in the quickest, most shortest, less filled with obstacle kind of way to get into the Promised Land. But we have to understand that for that to happen, we need to do tshuva. We need to essentially redefine the way that we think, redefine the way that we act, redefine the way that we relate to life. It is a true struggle. We need to not be tempted by all the delights and the pleasures and the cunning ways of the Yetzer Hara trying to get us to go back to our old ways. So what does Hashem do? Hashem says, listen, if I take you the shortcut way, you may get tempted by all these things that you're seeing along the side of the road. So what Hashem does is many times He takes us through the long cut. He takes us through a derech, through a pathway that essentially it may seem harder to reach our ultimate destination, but in the process, we're able to redefine our desires, redefine the way we relate to life, redesign the way that we relate to ourselves, and we don't get mixed up in all of the tactics of the Yetzer Hara. And so that is one of the things we see in this week's Parsha, is although essentially, Am Yisrael could have traveled to the promised land, could have gone straight into Eretz Yisrael in a very short way. Hashem had to take them through roundabouts kind of way, which sort of appears that it's unnatural. It seems like it's, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't seem logical. But the reason why Hashem does this is so that we won't get stuck with having all of this shortcut may be adorned with so many different nisyonot for the human soul to have to bear. So Hashem says, let me take you the long way, and it's the path of self-discovery, and one in which where you'll find yourself and discover how important it is to be attached to me, how important it is to live a life of Torah and mitzvahs, and not to get caught up by the world wine and the lights and the conniving tactics of the Yetzer Hara. And essentially, that's one of the things that we also learned when we crossed through Yam Suf. When we crossed through Yam Suf, essentially, what did we discover? We discovered a whole world that was undersea. Everything that we saw in front of us was revealed to us, but essentially, to the human eye, initially, it was all hidden. And so Hashem hints to us, the Torah hints to us through this crossing of the sea, through Parshat, this is the week of Parshat Shirah, where we sing the song of Az Yashir Moshe. Hashem opens up the sea in front of us, opens up the sea in front of Am Yisrael. He turns the reality right side up, because now we're able to see that which was hidden. Essentially, crossing through the sea was crossing from this world to the next world. Because when we're in this world, we see one thing. We don't see Hashem. We don't sometimes see all the amazing things that are happening under surface. So Hashem, so to speak, parted the seas, and by us entering into the sea, we were able to see reality upside down, or right side up is more correct. We were able to see this world and the next world, both side by side. And what we realize is that a person who is willing to jump into the sea, a person who's willing to go into the unrevealed realm of creation, we are essentially gifted with the ability to see both worlds. We're able to live essentially in both worlds. And that is one of the great messages of Parshat Beshalach, is that we need to run forward. We need to go into the place that maybe doesn't seem illogical. We need to move forward in life, even though it seems, but how am I going to make it? How am I going to be able to marry off my child? Nothing seems to appear on the horizon. How am I going to be able to pay my bills? Nothing seems to be opening up its doors for me in terms of being able to get out of this debt, or any point in time when a person feels they can no longer see the logical extension of one step after the next. At one point, we need to just go forward and say, Hashem, there's nothing more that I could do. I need to just jump forward into the sea. This is where you're telling me. You're telling me that I'm going into the promised land. Essentially, every single one of us is going into the promised land. Every step that we take, we're getting closer to our own personal geula as well as the collective geula. And so Hashem says, if you just go into the sea, if you just go, of course, logically, after doing all of our calculations, we're not talking about a blind walk. We're talking about after we've done everything that we possibly can, we, so to speak, cast our burden to Hashem. We leave everything into Hashem's hands. We accept reality for what it is. And what does Hashem do for us? He shows us the birds that are singing. He shows us the grass that's growing. Suddenly we see trees that are growing in the middle of nowhere. We see flowers blooming. We can go ahead and harvest fruits that weren't there before. And in any case, what I'm trying to get to is that we find that suddenly nature turns a course on us. And in the merit, which is actually one of the things that we've been learning this week with the Daily Dose of Emuna writings, in the merit of Emuna, of the sensory Emuna, the Emuna that I have in my heart that causes my body to move forward, causes my whole body to vibrate and radiate Emuna, I'm able to essentially move forward even into the most illogical places because of the fact that I know that this is what Hashem wants from me. And that's what Nachshon ben Aminadav knew. He knew that Hashem had promised Am Yisrael that their steps were going to take them to the promised land. He didn't just go blindly into the sea. He remembered, he understood, he internalized the message that Hashem was not just taking them into this wild, this wilderness of the desert. He understood that Hashem was taking Bnei Yisrael into the desert in order to be able to revamp their way of thinking and be able to realign their way of thought and their way of action so that it would be in tuned and aligned with Hashem's derech. And then they would be to the place where they would be able to accept the Torah and enter into the promised land, which is a state of mind of oneness with HaKadosh Baruch Hu without any interferences. So sometimes a person has to go into bare wasteland and redefine who they are in order for them to truly make a difference in their life. And essentially, going forward and being able to reach the level of prophecy that Am Yisrael were gifted with, reaching a level of prophecy when they crossed through Yam Suf. What is prophecy? Prophecy, how does a person get to a place where they're able to receive prophecy? In order to receive prophecy, which is a higher level of divine connectedness, to be able to understand and capture divinely wisdom, the human mind and the brain has to be able to, as we said before, be able to align itself, to be able to reach to a point where it's no longer closed within finite way of thinking. It has to, so to speak, think out of the box, right? So that's a very common motto and analogy and a way of expression that we use in today's world. Thinking out of the box means I have to be able to think differently. And essentially, that is nevuah. Nevuah, prophecy, is to be able to accept things by light of divine light, by means of divine thinking. And that doesn't always make sense. It actually doesn't make sense at all to the human mind. But you can't have both. You can't have human intellect and understanding and also the ability to align and connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so to speak, his way of thinking at the same time. The two of them don't match up to one another. The Ramchal brings down a very beautiful insight, and he the way he explains it is that let's just say there's 100% of reality that's standing in front of me right now. The human mind only captures a part of that 100% of reality. Why? Because, as we said before, the human mind is not pure enough. It's not divine enough to be able to see things on such a pure level, to be able to understand things from a divine perspective. And so essentially that's one of the things that when people take all these hallucinating drugs, that's what the hallucinating drugs do. It puts the person out of this reality so that they can see reality from a higher perspective. Now, many times, of course, it's delusional, but nevuah, in a way, is sort of looking at the 100% reality through means of hallucination, but you're seeing 100% truthful reality without having to use all those, God forbid, dangerous hallucinating drugs. But that's basically what it is. Nevuah is sort of a shattering of the current human mind and structure, so that in order to be able to connect myself to the divine wisdom, I have to break through the barriers of the mind, and, so to speak, put myself into the box of Hashem, which is wide and eternal. I know that it sounds a little bit complex, but if maybe you think about it a few more times, you'll sort of get the idea that it's all about being able to expand the vision and not only hold on to those the way that we always are used to thinking and the way we were trained to think. It's like I said, thinking out of the box. Moving right along, when we're talking about Mesirut Nefesh and the idea of sacrificing oneself, essentially that does go hand in hand with the idea of being able to attach ourselves to Hashem and be able to be in a place where we're able to receive prophecy and able to live more closely cleaving to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In order for us to be able to truly cleave to Hashem, we too need to shatter the borderlines of that which we are used to living, if it means certain mindsets, certain values we had placed in our minds because of Western thinking, Western culture thinking and training of the mind. We need to undo and untrain the way that we were thinking up until now and think on the level of miracle and divine and expansion of vision and thought. In other words, we need to say to ourselves, I know it may not make sense for me to, I'm just going to try to come up with an example. It may not make sense to me why, let's take an example of modesty. It may not make sense to me why I need to wear one size bigger clothing in order to adhere to modesty, and tznius regulation and halachas. It doesn't make sense to me why that would be a more refined way of looking, or an elevated spiritual. I'll be able to attain a more elevated spiritual level and be closer to Hashem through that type of clothing. What we need to do at that point is to say, I am not thinking on a logical pattern. If this is what Hashem wants from me, I'm going to go beyond my sensibility, so to speak, my logic and reason, my definition of what I think makes sense. I'm going to shatter that structure, that borderline that I placed for myself, and I'm going to live above it. In other words, I'm placing myself almost in a position where I'm living beyond my nature. I'm living in a position of a miracle. I'm going beyond my borderlines. And so, measure for measure, just like we are willing to go above and beyond what our logical thinking enables us to grasp, so too, Be'ezrat Hashem says, I will go above and beyond, and I will make sure that I am going to fuse myself, so to speak, the divinity, with the infinity, with the finite. So Hashem is willing to merge the two together in measure for measure, and that's zchut. Another last point that I'd like to bring up as well is the idea of how much Hashem loves us. Going into the sea was really considered to some, to many on the surface, again, if we're talking about logical Western thinking, it seems endangering one's lives. I mean, we're talking about elderly, we're talking about young children. They were all brought through the sea, and essentially they were placing themselves in danger. And to many it would seem that's very illogical. Why would you be willing to do something like that? That's endangering the lives of so many in order to what? For a promise, so to speak, that Hashem is going to bring you to Geula. And yet, in this week's Parsha, we see how important it is for us to know that when we do something for the sake of Shemayim, when we do something for the sake of coming close to Hashem and fulfilling Hashem's desire, Hashem's will, so to speak, that is what gives us the koach to be able to do the illogical. That is what that is what essentially pushes our legs forward to be able to take another step in life and get up another morning and do another mitzvah. It's that ability for us to think beyond that which I'm seeing right now and be able to say to myself, you know what? Hashem is with me right now. Hashem is leading my way. I'm not just taking these steps randomly. Hashem is essentially going along with me. And that is giving me, that's giving us, Klal Yisrael, the koach to be able to withstand the lengthy galut and the difficulty that all of us are going through right now, each in his own perspective, what everyone's going through in their own way. That is what gives us the koach. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai Zatzal teaches us that at the same moment when Am Yisrael were going from Bavel, they were going into exile to Bavel, and they were just distraught, and they were so saddened and so weakened. But yet it's written that Yecheskel HaNavi, he was able to see at that point during Galut Bavel that all Yisrael, when they were going out into Galut, he was able to see that Hashem was calling all the chariots from above, that they were essentially being called to escort Am Yisrael to make sure that they weren't feeling alone, that it was important that Hashem wanted Am Yisrael to know that they were not going into Galut alone. And so Yecheskel HaNavi was given he was privy to this vision, this amazing prophetic vision, that he was able to see all of the chariots, the heavenly chariots, so to speak, going and being called from Hashem. Come, let's go together and let's participate in the difficulty, in the sorrow of Am Yisrael as they're going into Galut. We're going to be going down with them. And when Am Yisrael found out about this, and they realized that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so to speak, was joining them in their difficulty, and Bechol Tzaratam Lo Tzar, that Hashem is with us everywhere we go in our pain, in our difficulty. Hashem, so to speak, lifted them up and gave them the koach to be able to withstand all of the difficulty. There's a pasuk in Tehillim that expresses this beautiful, when Adam thinks to himself, as written in Tehillim, Avi ve'imi azavuni, my mother and my father have forsaken me, have left me. The next following words that follow this, we always have to remember, Hashem ya'asfeni, Hashem is going to collect me, so to speak. Hashem is going to lift me up from that place. So no matter where I am, how difficult the task at hand appears, we always need to remember that Hashem is with us, and this is what gave Am Yisrael the koach to be able to live through to be able to jump into the sea and be able to move forward. I'm going to end on just touch a little bit on the idea of Az Yashir Moshe Uvnei Yisrael Et Hashira Azot. Then Moshe and the children of Am Yisrael chose to sing the song. Rabbi Nachman teaches us, is many times a song is born from a place of darkness, of feeling I've crossed through so many difficult paths in my life, and I don't even know where I'm going to be going, and I don't see Hashem, I don't feel anything, I only see dark, I feel so blocked off. And many times song is born Dafka, particularly from that place, from a place where I don't recognize that Hashem is even there. And that's where I burst out in song. That's where I realize, but wait a minute, I'm not alone. Hashem wants me to sing. He wants me to feel hope. He wants me to feel His closeness. He wants me to recognize that He's there with me, specifically there. And that is what gives me the brightness. That's what gives me the koach, the strength to be able to go through those terrifying moments. For instance, going into the see what a difficult moment that must have been for Am Yisrael, not knowing, will the sea suddenly, God forbid, the waters fall and swallow them up? And yet they sang because they realized that at this moment, when I'm doing Ratzon Hashem, even though it's hard for me and I don't know what to expect from it, there certainly must be some compassion here, and through me singing to Hashem and having expressing through song full trust and Emuna that I know, Hashem, that you only desire to want me to become close to you. All you want, Hashem, is to reveal yourself to me. That is a light that's born out of darkness. And that is the light that's actually born through song, Rabbi Nachman teaches us. And that is essentially where this song spurred from in Am Yisrael. It's spurred from a place of them knowing that there's a great light that's yet to be born. And this is a song that's going to express from my heart a gratitude and acknowledging the fact that I'm not alone. Hashem, you're with me. You have tremendous compassion with me. You have angels following me and leading me to my next step. And so a song is that expression of being able to bring us out, that transition of being brought out from darkness into light. So Be'ezrat Hashem, we have many points to think about and ponder in this week's Parsha. May it be a Parsha of Simcha to bring us and elevate us to the point where we'll feel closeness to Hashem. Every moment that we walk forward, we all feel like we're walking into a sea of unknown. Be'ezrat Hashem, Hashem part the sea so that we'll be able to see the world right side up. We'll be able to see things in the proper perspective through Emuna eyes. And Be'ezrat Hashem, have a wonderful Shabbat Kodesh and feel ourselves soon, Be'ezrat Hashem, mamash, feel ourselves walking into the promised land of Eretz HaKodesh, Be'ezrat Hashem, Admat Kodesh, with the binyan of the Bet HaMikdash, b'mehera v'yameinu, amen, ken yehi ratzon. Have a great Shabbat.